Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters Encounters video. All right, let's go ahead and let's wrap up the trilogy of encounters that I had previously chronicled here on my channel from a user there on Reddit. This was on the reddit.com website, the subreddit called Humanoid Encounters. The user was someone by the name of Snathius. I had previously chronicled two of those encounters before. The previous one had to do with the grandfather who apparently ran into some hoofed creature there in Texas in the 1960s on some bridge. And then the one before that happened to do with the user's father there involving some kind of weird Birdman by Lake Choke Canyon. This one, the one that wraps up this trilogy, has to do with a fan favorite, Bigfoot. Lots of you fans out there still enjoy those stories associated with that all-star cryptid. So look at this. In this case, it's the user's father, this time running into a Bigfoot-like creature there in Texas in the late 90s. So very interesting stuff. A little bit shorter story here, but I'm going to chronicle it and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions and let me know what you guys and gals think. But it comes again from that user. And it's titled, in this case, I'm sorry, the user by the name of Snathius. And then this one is titled Bigfoot Like Creature in the Hill Country, 1998. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. And then let me know what you guys and gals think as well. So here's what that user states. My father, who is working as a construction contractor, had a work crew leave a job site in a panic frenzy once because they saw a Bigfoot like creature in the creek behind the house that they were working on. This happened at a house they were building a two-story garage at in the hill country, a little bit north of Spring Branch, Texas. I think it was around 1998. I was around 9 years old. My brother was 6. The house that they were working on was on a piece of land way out between Blanco and Spring Branch. My father told us that the work crew called him from a payphone at a gas station in Bulverde around noon. They told him they weren't going back to the job site until the following day because they were scared blankless, and if it would be okay for them to bring some rifles and shotguns to keep in their trucks on that project at least until they were done. These were a no nonsense group of laborers, hard-working guys who would be at the job site from 8 a.m. until sundown, busting their blanks in the hot sun to earn a decent paycheck. But apparently, around lunchtime, after the crew had eaten and were resting in their trucks and in the shade of some trees, one of the guys went down to the creek behind the house to take a leak and explore the property a bit until it was time for them to get back to work. Behind the house was a sloped wooded area that led down to a nice little shallow creek. It was here where he said he saw what he thought was a big brown bear peeking around at a tree at him. Naturally, he got a little bit spooked and started slowly backpedaling to the house up the hill, trying his best not to make any sudden movements and to not take his eyes off of this bear. As he was making his way back up the steep hill to the house job site to where the rest of the guys were, the bear ran from behind a tree and then darted across the creek into the woods right onto the other side. This was when the worker got a clear look at it and saw that it wasn't a bear. It ran upright on two legs and had the build of a large man covered in dark fur. When he saw it run and realized that it wasn't a bear, that's when he broke into a frenzied run over to the rest of the guys, screaming at them to get into the trucks and for them to leave. They were a little bit thrown off by him, but he jumped onto his truck and then peeled off. And the rest of them saw how scared he was and quickly followed him over into their two trucks. There's a few more stories that I'm sure I'm missing. I might do another post later. Thanks for reading. And then that's it. That wraps up this trilogy of encounters from the user Snathius. So with this one, let's talk about this latest Bigfoot encounter here. Interesting stuff, right? Here you have a situation involving an encounter with a strange Bigfoot like creature there in somewhere central Texas back in the late 90s. So, if you were here in Texas in the late 90s, this was just before the boom that Texas experienced in terms of the entire world moving here. This would have been probably towards the .com error. Shortly after that, that's when things really started to explode. But so back then, if this really took place there in Spring Branch, Texas, I had to look it up too to see exactly where it's at. It looks like it's one of those little mini cities just surrounding the entire area of Houston, Texas. Then this literally would have been like nothing. This would have been just pure grass, maybe a few houses here and there somewhere out there, but otherwise it would have been very, very isolated. Although I was a little bit confused because the story also took place, they said, one of the people there, in other words, went to a gas station in Bulverde, and I had to look that one up, and that one is not near Houston per se. It's a little bit further away from Houston, so I'm a little bit confused on there, but I'm going to go with instead Spring Branch, Texas, as to this encounter. But yeah, this is what happened apparently to that person's father's workers. So it didn't necessarily happen to the father themselves, but they in turn had a crew, and it looks like these were these laborers working on this house. There they were, just pretty much going from sun up to sundown, and then these were a hard group of men, and then all of a sudden one of them started to bolt and then run away. Why they did that was because of this. They stated that they saw this weird bear creature, which at first they thought was a bear, peeking at them whenever they went over to some part of the land to essentially just take a leak. And then when they saw this thing looking back at them and thinking that it was a bear, it was smart of them to move slowly, not make any sudden movements, not take the eyes off the bear, so that way they knew that the bear was there at all times and then they could flee if needed. The only thing was this thing decided to actually move themselves. And when it darted from one area to another, as that person stated, it was across the creek and into the woods. That's when this laborer saw that it was not a bear. It was actually a Bigfoot like creature. It was something massive. They described it as being upright on two legs, had the build of a large man, and it was covered in dark fur. I totally believe that someone can tell the difference between a bear and also a Bigfoot. You would just see it and know it in the moment of an instant. You're looking at something and you realize it's a bear, and then when you get a closer look at it, you realize that it's not. So I truly do believe that this laborer knew the distinction between both of them. And so him in turn realizing that it wasn't a bear, that it was something Bigfoot like, they ran out to the truck, skedaddled out of there as quickly as possible, and then the workers, frightened at the situation, decided to do the same as well, telling the father afterward if they could come back with rifles and shotguns. Now the only thing I could surmise as to why this Bigfoot-like creature was there around that habitat ties into what I was mentioning a minute ago. This was out there most likely in the middle of nowhere before everyone moved to Texas. So new homes would be building up in that area, and that would have been Bigfoot land. That would have been something involving the area where Bigfoot normally didn't have any humanoid encounters or human encounters. And then now here they were having this person basically just taking a leak out there and wondering what's going on, what's happening. And lo and behold, they ended up actually being looked at the same time. So I'm wondering then if there were even more encounters with these developers, everyone else that was creating all these new homes, compared to 1998 up until today, 20 plus years later, 25 plus years later, it's a whole different story. Whatever was out there, if it truly was anything involving the land of Bigfoot, it's long gone by now. Here in Texas, every single part surrounding major cities from Dallas to San Antonio, Houston, Austin, all these other little mini cities have developed around those areas, and it's just causing an influx of so much population that there's bound to be very little land that used to be, if it was Bigfoot land, that it truly is that type of land for them anymore. They would have moved probably way out west, and there's still areas, lots of big areas in Texas that are rather isolated if you move westward, because that's where a lot less people are out there. It's just no man's land basically out there. So I would imagine that they would have moved somewhere out there instead. But let me know what you guys and gals think about this very unique encounter. Was this a Bigfoot? Was it caught by surprise? Was it just basically peeking and then suddenly it was seen? Stuff like that. Let me know. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.